They didn't even bother whispering. "Fool woman," said Old Man Ketchum, as he leaned on the porch rail, pipe smoke curling in the cold morning air. "Ain't no place for a lady to raise a cabin. It'll freeze by Christmas." The others chuckled. Ranchers, traders, the blacksmith's greasy son, all gathered outside the general store like it was theater day. And the main act? A lone woman dragging lumber up a snow-dusted hill with nothing but a mule and a stubborn heart. Clara May Boone didn't flinch, didn't look back. The log scraped through frozen earth like thunder rolling. Her shawl flapped against a wind that hadn't forgiven this town in decades, and yet she moved like she was chasing something older than winter, or maybe running from it. 3 months a widow. Her husband, Ellis Boone, had been found in a gully with half his face gone and his rifle snapped clean in two. Wolves, they said, but Clara knew Ellis didn't die from teeth. She wasn't just building a home, she was building a wall between her and everything that had come before. By noon, her hands bled. By dusk, her fingers were stiff, and the first log still wasn't set. The townfolk watched like buzzards on fence posts, whispering bets on how many days it would take her to crawl back down. But Clara wasn't made for crawling. That night, while others warmed their feet by stoves and traded tales over whiskey, Clara, huddled under canvas, shivering, her breath fogged the stars. Coyotes howled in the dark, and something heavy, low, cracked a branch near the tree line. She reached for the rifle her husband left her, unfired, untested. At dawn, there was frost on her eyelids and sweat on her brow. Her mule had run. Her boots had iced through, but her arms, still working, still lifting. The town kept laughing until the 6th night. That's when the snow came. Not flakes walls. White sheets fell like God had ripped open the sky. Trees cracked, roofs sagged. Livestock froze where they stood, the men who mocked her. They were the first to pound on each other's doors, begging for shelter. Clara, up on that lonely ridge, had no one to knock for. Just a frame, 4 walls. No, roof. And yet, from inside that half-built cabin, there was a flicker of flame. And a woman who hadn't given up, not yet, not ever. The 7th nail bent sideways beneath her frozen knuckles. Clara sighed, pulling it out with the back of her hammer, her breath rising in visible puffs. The wood groaned in protest, wet, stiff, unwilling to become a home. Much like the land itself. Everything on this frontier pushed back, like it was trying to spit her out. She wasn't from here. That's what they whispered too. "She don't belong," said the blacksmith's boy on her 2nd day on the ridge. "Her hands are soft. Don't care how many calluses she's rubbed in." But they hadn't seen her wash Ellis's blood off the floorboards. They hadn't heard the crack of her own voice at the burial when no priest would come. This wasn't about proving anything to them. It was about proving something to herself, that she could still build something in a world that had taken everything. The wind howled louder that evening, whistling through half-made walls. Snow licked the edges of her frame like a warning tongue. She tightened her coat and dragged another beam into place, boots crunching and gathering frost behind her. A shape shifted near the trees. She froze. Too big for a coyote, too silent for a deer, still for wind. She reached for the rifle leaning against the stump. Her hand brushed the cold metal, and the shape vanished into the woods. Her heart thumped against her ribs louder. Then the wind. That night, she didn't sleep. She sat in the frame of her unfinished home with her back to the fire, rifle across her lap and eyes trained on the dark. The storm was coming, and maybe something else with it. The day Ellis died. The sun had no warmth. Clara remembered how the light looked on the snow, too bright to clean. A lie over something ugly. He'd gone out to check the northern trap line, said he'd be back. "Before dusk, boil the kettle, Clara." He smiled. "He'll come home cold." He never came home. They found him 2 days later in a ravine just past Broken Antler Ridge, face torn open, rifle bent like it had been gripped by God himself and crushed. His horse wandered back with frozen foam on its mouth and no saddle. Wolves. The sheriff said, though he didn't sound convinced, but Clara knew her husband. Ellis had served in the war. He could smell death before it came. He wouldn't have let himself be taken by animals, and he wouldn't have left the necklace, her locket, lying open on the snow. Right beside his hand, there was something else that never made sense. Someone had taken his boots. Clara had buried that memory, the way she buried him, deep and hard. Now, the storm whispering through her ribs and the trees murmuring warnings, she thought of it again. She saw Ellis's blood blooming in the snow like some cruel flower, and she wondered if the thing in the woods wasn't watching her, but watching over her, or worse, waiting for her to remember something she wasn't supposed to. She tossed more wood into the fire, but it gave little comfort. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was being unraveled, that maybe the ground under her cabin wasn't just frozen, was hiding something. It came just after midnight. One moment, the woods were black and breathless. The next, snow fell like it had been waiting all season to strike. Not soft, not gentle. Like ash after a fire, heavy and fast. Clara woke to the hiss of it hitting canvas. She rolled from her cot, grabbed the lantern, and stepped into the storm. Her fire was out. Her mule was gone, rope snapped, prints already filling with white. The frame of her cabin groaned in the wind, like a body resisting a scream. She rapped her coat tighter, pulled her scarf to her nose, and checked the posts. Still upright, but shaking. If she didn't finish the roof by tomorrow, she'd be buried with the cabin. From the edge of the tree line, a cracking sound echoed. She froze. Another, and then silence. No footsteps, no growl, just falling snow. And that unbearable, creeping quiet. She should have gone back inside. Should have stayed by the dying coals and prayed for daylight instead. She walked to the ridge. Her lantern flickered in the wind. Shadows leaping off every trunk, every rise, and then she saw it. A boot print, deep fresh, heading toward her half-built cabin. She bent down, touched the edge. Still warm. Her breath caught. The shape of it was wrong. Too large for Ellis, too clean for the blacksmith's boots, and spaced too far apart for someone limping. Whoever it was, they were strong and close. She turned around fast. Heart in her throat, nothing, just snow. Swirling like ghosts in a fever dream, she backed up, steps careful, rifle in hand. Each crunch echoed louder than it should have. Back inside, she locked the door that barely held. The lantern flickered once, then went out. Darkness, silence. Only her breath, the faint sound of something moving on the roof. The roof creaked. Not from the weight of snow. Clara had learned that sound. This was different, deliberate, like something placing its weight. Slowly, one step at a time, testing the timbers above her head. She held her breath. No wind. No animal call. Just the groan of her cabin frame and her own heartbeat hammering against her ribs. She pulled the rifle closer. The lantern was dead. The coals were cold. She sat in total blackness, lit only by the faint white glow of snow pressing. Against the torn seams in her canvas wall, another sound. Lighter this time. A thump, like a boot brushing down the slope of her half-roof. Her eyes strained upward. Nothing. She moved slow, fingers finding the edge of the hammer she'd used earlier. Her other hand never left the rifle. Just then, something slid down. The front planks of the cabin. Clara shot up, heart slamming into her throat. She cocked the rifle and stepped toward the doorway, pressing her back against the inner wall. Her hands trembled, not from cold. From memory, she hadn't fired this gun since Ellis handed it to her that last morning. And now, someone was out there then? Dash knock, 3 dull, wet thumps on the outside wall, not the door. The wall. She nearly dropped the rifle. Who's there? She called, but her voice cracked halfway through. No reply. Achoo. Just the wind pushing snow. Through the cracks, like 1,000 tiny knives, she forced herself to move. Every inch of her wanted to freeze, curl into the dark and pretend this wasn't happening. But something deeper moved her legs. She crept to the door. Another knock, slower this time. She raised the rifle with both hands, stepped toward the latch, and with one breath, yanked the door open. Nothing, no one stood there. Just empty snow swirling like ghosts in the dark. She stepped outside, heart thudding in her chest. Then she saw it. A trail of deep, wet footprints leading away from the cabin. Halfway down the ridge, collapsed in the snow, a man, face down. Arms stretched forward like he'd been crawling. Clara rushed forward, boots crunching through the snow. She flipped him over and recoiled blood. Lots of it. His coat was torn at the shoulder, soaked dark. His lips were cracked and blue. Hair clung to his forehead like frozen threads. But his eyes opened when she touched him, and he whispered, broken and shaking, "Ellis told me you'd be here." Clara didn't speak at first. She just stared at the man's lips, now blue and trembling. It's barely moving after dropping Ellis's name like a stone in a still pond. She wanted to demand answers, but all that came out was, "How?" His head lolled. Eyes fluttered. Then Dash fainted. Her instinct kicked in. It's no time to question, no time to panic. She gripped his coat, dragged his weight through the snow, and hauled him inside. The door slammed behind them, sealing out the white silence of the world. The fire was long dead. She relit it with shaking hands, feeding in her last dry timber. The glow returned slowly, casting flickering light across his face. Blood-soaked. His left shoulder, torn fabric, puncture wound. She pressed rags to it, grit her teeth when he winced. Then she saw something else. A chain around his neck. She pulled gently, and out came a pendant. Not just any. Ellis's old cavalry dog tag. It shouldn't have been with anyone but him. She stepped back, breath short. "Who are you?" The man coughed, head turning. "Name's Reese. Reese Whitaker, you were with Ellis." His jaw twitched. "Long time ago. War. Later other things." "What other things?" Her voice sharpened. Suspicion flared through her bones like fever. But he didn't answer. Sleep took him again. She stayed by the fire that night. One eye on the door, the other on the wounded man who'd crawled through a blizzard with her dead husband's name on his lips, and a past heavy enough to bleed through the snow by morning. The storm had buried half her walls in Reese. He was burning up with fever, muttering Ellis's name like a prayer, or a curse. By dawn, the wind screamed like a thing dying outside. Clara pressed the cabin door shut against drifting snow. It no longer latched, just leaned. The storm had cracked the lower hinge during the night. Her half-built home was being swallowed by winter, inch by inch. Inside, Reese burned. She wiped his brow again, and he jolted upright like lightning had. Passed through him. "Don't let them bury me out there," he rasped. Not like him. Clara flinched. "Who, Ellis?" Reese turned toward. Her eyes fogged from fever. "They said it was wolves. Said he fell in the ravine. But I saw what was left wasn't no wolves." She froze, breath caught between past and present. Reese coughed, voice rasping like gravel. "You knew Ellis wore this tag?" He lifted the chain weakly. "Gave it to me that night. Told me to run. Did if he didn't make it, someone had to tell you." Clara leaned in, the floor vanishing beneath her thoughts. "Tell me what?" Reese just collapsed again, sweating and shaking. She gripped his shoulder. "Tell me." He winced. He wasn't hunting game out there. He was meeting someone. Clara's fingers loosened. Her mouth went dry. "Who?" Reese's lips trembled. "A man named Cutter. He came to settle something. Something from Missouri. Said you could never know." And just like that, silence filled the room again. Heavy, unforgiving. Clara backed away. She felt the cold now, in her bones. All this time, she thought Ellis was a victim of the land. But if Reese was right, her husband had secrets. Dangerous ones. She stared at the tag, metal echo of a man she might not have truly known. Outside, the storm moaned louder. Inside, a woman sat alone in the cold, wondering how much of her past was built on lies, and what might be coming next through the trees. The storm didn't stop. It thickened by afternoon. Snow pushed halfway up the cabin walls, and light faded early like the sky itself had surrendered. The fire hissed and spat smoke. Damn wood. Last of her kindling, Reese hadn't spoken again. He drifted in and out, mumbling pieces of things that didn't make sense. Train tracks, red scarf. The old bridge like echoes from a world she wasn't part of. Clara knew fever dreams. But something about his words stuck. She sat by the fire, wrapping his coat tighter around him, when her eyes fell to the floorboards. One plank near the hearth had always sat a little loose. Ellis meant to fix it. He never did. Something stirred inside her. She reached for the poker and wedged it under the edge, prying the board up slow. Beneath it, wrapped in oilskin and tied with leather, was a bundle she hadn't seen before. Hands trembling, she unwrapped it. Inside, a folded letter yellowed with time. On the back, her name, Clara May Boone, written in Ellis's hand. She stared at it like it might vanish. Then breath. Held, she opened it. My dearest Clara, if this letter ever finds your hands, I've already failed you. And I'm sorry, there are things I never told you. Not because I didn't love you, but because I did. Some sins don't wash out in marriage or time. Missouri was a start, not a clean slate. There's a man named Cutter. If he ever comes to, that land, leave. Don't reason, don't bargain, just go. He's the last thread between who I was and who I became. If Reese brings you this, trust him, but keep your rifle close. The words blurred. Her breath caught in her throat. She reread the lines 3 times, each time feeling the ground of her life shift under her dadas. The man who held her through storms. Carved their initials in the barn. Door kissed her fingertips like sacred things. Had been hiding from someone named Cutter. She looked toward the door. Snow piled high outside. The wind shrieked, and for the first time since Ellis's death, Clara felt afraid not of the cold, but of who might be coming for her now that the truth had finally surfaced. The storm cracked the sky open. Ice blasted sideways. Trees bent. Roof above Clara moaned like it might give out. Inside, Reese stirred in his sleep, jaw tight, arms twitching like he was fighting ghosts. Clara sat across the room, letter in hand, eyes dry but hollow. She had read it again and again. If he ever comes, leave. But she couldn't. The storm wouldn't let her. And something deep inside her whispered, he's already here. That morning, if it could be called that, she saw him, just a flicker, a figure in the tree line across the ridge. Hat low, shoulders broad, still as stone. She blinked, and he was gone. But her stomach knew before her mind did. Cutter Reese gasped awake around midday, lungs rattling like gravel in a bucket. She ran to him, but he shoved himself upright before she touched him. Where is he? He asked. Clara's blood froze. You saw him too? Reese nodded. He's been following me since Abilene, tracked me through rivers, set fire to the stables where I slept. He wants something Ellis took. Clara shook her head. Ellis was a good man. Looked at her like he pitied her. He was a survivor. He said good came second. Outside, the wind howled louder, not natural anymore, like something calling. That evening, gunshots echoed down the valley. 3. Then silence. Clara's rifle shook in her hands by nightfall. Someone knocked at the sheriff's house in town, but when he opened the door, he found only snow. A red scarf pinned to his wall with a hunting knife. The same scarf Ellis wore the day he died. By morning, 5 of the townsmen rode out to Clara's ridge knot to mock her, but to beg for shelter. Their roofs had caved in. One man's boy had frostbite. Another carried his wife wrapped in blankets, barely breathing. They looked at Clara with desperation in their eyes, and for the first time in weeks, she realized they weren't laughing anymore. They were looking to her to survive. But as she opened the door and let them in, she whispered to herself, "It won't be the cold that kills us." They came in shaking 6 townsfolk, 3 barely walking, the others silent. Eyes sunken, lips cracked from cold. Clara's cabin, half finished, leaking at the seams, became a sanctuary. A fire burned bright, canned beans warmed over flame. Boots lined up by the door like a prayer for survival. No one mocked her now. Even Sheriff Dunley. No one spat tobacco near her boots and called her a foolish widow. sat quiet by the hearth. He didn't speak unless spoken to. Clara watched them all. Her fingers gripped her rifle as she stirred the pot. Reese slept in the far corner, still burning up, his coat soaked with sweat. Outside, the others froze. Something moved beyond the window. Not the wind. Sheriff Dunley reached for his pistol. Clara stepped forward, heart hammering, and then scratch. Scratch on the wooden wall. Deliberate, sharp. She yanked open the door. Nothing but snow. But when she stepped outside, she saw it. A mark, carved into her cabin wall with a knife, plus below it, phrase in deep gouges. Debts come due. Her throat tightened. Reese's initials. And Cutter's. She stepped back, eyes scanning the woods. Stillness. Then motion, a black horse disappearing into the trees. He'd been here, inches away. Back inside, she bolted the door. No one spoke. Later that night, young Emma Porter barely. 13 coughed red into her hands. Pneumonia. Fast, her father held her, rocking slow. She needs medicine, he whispered. We need the doc. No one's getting through that storm, Sheriff Dunley muttered. Reese stirred, his voice cracked from the dark. He'll wait till we break. Cutter always waits for weakness. Then, as if summoned by name, another shot rang out in the night. Closer this time, Clara looked to her rifle, and to the townsfolk. For better or worse, they were hers now. And something out there intended to collect what Ellis owed with. Blood got Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat near the door, rifle resting in her lap, eyes sharp, breath shallow. The fire crackled low. Outside, snow whispered against the logs like it wanted in. Emma's cough had worsened. Her father sat awake, arms wrapped around her, rocking slow. Sheriff Dunley was by the window, peeking through a slit in the canvas. One hand on his pistol, the other on his flask. Reese, pale but awake, gestured her close. We need a plan, he whispered. He won't come alone. Clara glanced around the room. We're outnumbered, low on food, no ammo left for the small. Gunsry smiled weakly. Then we don't fight him like cowboys. We fight like ghosts. He laid out a simple plan. They'd fake an evacuation, lure Cutter's men inside, one by one, choke their numbers. Most of them are afraid of cold and dark, Reese said, but not him. Clara nodded. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. She woke the others, whispered the plan. Quiet nods followed. Stephen Dunley, reluctant, agreed as they prepared. Clara moved toward the back corner of the cabin to gather the hidden rifle Ellis had once buried under the AI. Plank, she lifted the board and stopped. The rifle was gone. Her stomach turned. She rushed back toward Reese. Did you take the repeater? She whispered. He blinked, shook his head. No. Her eyes darted across the cabin. Someone had taken it. She stepped slow, scanning faces. The old man from the general store, the widow and her twin boys, the sheriff. Then, her eyes landed on a tall, silent figure near the back wall. Sam Rudd, the trapper. Rough man, drank too much, never said much in town. He was looking at her now. Too calm. Clara stepped forward. Sam, where's my rifle? He didn't answer. Reese sat up straighter. Clara, he's not breathing cold. She froze and saw it no steam from Sam's mouth. No frost on his coat. No redness in his cheeks. He hadn't come in from the storm because he'd never been out in it. Clara lifted her gun. You're not here for shelter, are you? Sam smiled, not kindly, not warmly, but the smile of a man who knew something. No. One else did. Cutter says hi. And then, like thunder, a shot rang out inside the cabin. The shot shattered the cabin's silence. Screams echoed off the log walls. Someone dropped to the floor, heavy, limp. Smoke curled from a pistol. Clara spun, heart hammering, ears ringing. Reese was on his knees, dragging himself toward Emma and her father, shielding them with his body. Sam Rudd, the imposter, was gone. The back door barely hung on its hinges, swung wide open. Snow and cold burst inside like a flood, and near the hearth, Sheriff Dunley stood frozen, pistol smoking in his grip. Everyone stared. Then a groan from the floor. The general store man, bleeding from the shoulder. Sheriff Dunley lowered the gun slowly. He reached for the rifle, he said, voice like gravel. Clara didn't speak. She moved past the chaos, past the blood, out into the storm barefoot. Rifle in hand, snow-bitter skin like fire. She followed the trail. Sam's not far. Only 50 feet down the ridge stood Sam Rudd, blade in hand, watching her with the confidence of a man who'd already won. "You're not ready for what's coming," said. Clara aimed. "Neither are you." But he didn't flinch. "You think you're a leader now?" he asked.
Ellis
"Lied to you. He lied to us all. What did he take from Cutter?" But Sam just backed away into the storm. Disappearing like smoke, she didn't follow. Back inside, Reese was trying to stabilize the wounded man. Dunley stood alone near the window, face pale. "I told you he was a snake," Reese growled. But Clara wasn't sure anymore. Sheriff Dunley had taken the shot too fast. The man he hit hadn't been armed, and now, Sam, the real threat was gone. Again. Clara looked between the two men, Reese and Dunley. One of them would have to take charge. With her, she just wasn't sure which one she could trust, and outside, deep in the trees, the black horse returned. This time with a second rider. Clara couldn't sleep. Her hands trembled as she poured water into a tin cup. Emma's father nodded gratefully, eyes hollow from fear. The rest of the cabin sat in tense silence. No one spoke. No one trusted Sheriff. Dunley sat by the window again, cradling his pistol. Reese hadn't taken his eyes off him since the gun went off. Clara couldn't think, not clearly, until she remembered the cellar. It was shallow, just a storage hole dug before the frost set. Ellis built it in Somerset. He'd use it for dry goods, but she'd always wondered why he lined the bottom with stone. Clara lit a lantern and slipped through the trapdoor while the others whispered upstairs. Cold hit her instantly. Then the silence, thick and waiting, she pried up the stone tile in the far corner. Beneath it, buried in dirt and time, was a small iron box, rusted at the edges, locked tight. She brought it upstairs. Polka dot inside, a folded canvas map, a wedding ring. In a leather pouch, the map was hand-drawn, the Boone homestead, the valley, and a trail marked in red that led to Dead Horse Bluff. On the pouch, one word, daughter. Clara's heart stopped. She opened it slowly. Inside were letters. 5, maybe 6, all written in Ellis's rough hand. But not addressed to her, to Anna, to my girl. She blinked. "Who's Anna?" Reese leaned in, eyes wide. "He told me once, before Missouri. There was someone, child, but she was. Lost in a raid, he thought she'd died." Clara's voice cracked. "She didn't?" Reese shook his head. He found her again, but he couldn't claim her. Not after all he'd done. The second rider, Clara's fingers tightened around the pouch. Ellis hadn't taken something from Cutter. He'd taken someone, his daughter. And now she was riding through a blizzard. Either to find her father's widow, or to finish what? He started. Outside, a horn echoed in the valley. Long, hollow. Clara moved to the door. Snow blew hard against it. She opened it slowly, and on the ridge above the cabin. In the swirling snow stood 2 horses. One rider held a lantern. The other, smaller, slimmer, held a rifle aimed directly at Clara's chest. The wind howled. Snow lashed the roof like claws. Inside, the fire flickered low. Cabin walls creaked like bones straining under weight they couldn't bear. Clara stood at the door, breath visible in the cold air, crossed the ridge to figures. Stared down at her, Cutter and Anna. Anna, the girl Ellis never told her about. The girl riding with a gun aimed at her chest. Behind Clara, Reese whispered, "Close the door. We can hold them." But Clara didn't move. She stepped outside. The cold hit her like a slap. Snow up to her knees. But her eyes never left Anna's. "I know who you are," Clara called, "and I know what he meant to you." Anna didn't speak. Cutter stepped forward. His voice smooth like a snake sliding over stone. She was mine before she was his. And you're living in a lie built on someone else's bones. Clara lifted her chin. If you want revenge, take it, but the girl, she deserves the truth. Anna lowered the rifle just slightly. I read his letters, Clara said. He loved you. He thought you were dead. When he found you again, he couldn't undo the past, but he wanted to. Anna blinked fast. Snowflakes caught in her lashes. Cutter leaned in toward her. She's spinning tales. Same as Ellis. You shoot now, we end this. Silence, then dash bang. The sound echoed like thunder over snow. Clara flinched, heart seizing, but she was still standing. Behind her, a shout. A thud, she spun. Sheriff Dunley hid blood in the snow. His pistol still warm, Anna had shot past Clara through the open doorway. Cutter's eyes flared. What did you do? Anna didn't answer. She slid off her horse and began walking toward Clara, rifle lowered, boots crunching snow. Where's the map? She asked softly. Clara nodded slowly, shoulders shaking. How long? Sighed. Along with the truth. Cutter cursed. He raised his revolver, but Reese fired first. Cutter's hat flew off. A warning shot. The old man froze. You want a war? Reese growled from the doorway. You won't survive it. Cutter backed his horse away, rage burning in his eyes. You'll regret this, he spat. No, Anna said quietly, without looking at him. I already did. Cutter didn't leave. He circled the ridge like a wounded wolf, waiting for weakness. The storm didn't scare him, nor did the dwindling ammunition inside Clara's cabin. But something had changed. Anna's silence. Dart. Betrayal. Her choice, Clara could feel it. Inside the cabin, the tension was thick. Reese loaded the final 2 cartridges into his rifle. Clara handed a tin cup to Anna, who sat on the floor near the fire, clutching her father's old map. She didn't just shoot Dunley, Reese said. She chose us. Anna looked up, eyes tired. I chose the truth. Outside, hoofbeats crunched closer. Reese moved to the window. He's coming, Clara turned to Anna. You don't have to do this. But Anna stood, steady, strong. Yes, I do. They waited by the door, lanterns low, rifles ready. Breath tight in their chests, then dash banged. Cutter kicked the door open. Blasted in, behind him, 2 hired guns, faces masked. Boots soaked. Cutter stepped inside like he owned the place. Give me the girl and the map, he growled. No, Clara said simply. He raised his gun, but Anna was faster. Crack. Her shot caught his arm. The gun dropped. Reese took out one of the masked men with a single bullet. Clara dove behind the table, firing at the second. Then Cutter lunged. Not for Clara, not for Anna, but for the fire. He grabbed the map. Throwing it into the flames? No. Anna screamed, diving toward it. But Clara kicked the iron kettle over the fire. Steam hissed. The flames died. The map. Singed but whole. Cutter cursed, bleeding, cornered. He reached for a knife, but Reese stepped in, slamming him back against the cabin wall. Enough, Clara said, rifle aimed. Ellis died trying to protect what you destroyed. Cutter spit. Blood, you think you've won? You're just a woman in the woods? Clara stepped forward. Maybe, but tonight, I was the storm. She pulled the trigger, clicked empty, but Cutter didn't move. He just stared at her, then collapsed, unconscious. Hours later, the sheriff's posse arrived. Dunley survived. Barely. The storm cleared by morning. Anna stayed. She helped patch the cabin, rebuilt the fire. Sat beside Clara, not as a stranger, but as family, as they watched the sunrise break over the snow-covered ridge. Reese leaned over to Clara. You did it, he said. No, Clara whispered. We did. And if you're still breathing after that storm, friend, then you're the kind of soul who feels every beat, every bullet, every tear in a story that hits this hard. If you felt even one chill, if Clara's stand meant something, don't scroll away empty-handed. like this video. Subscribe to Luminous Tales, where every story burns into memory like the last fire in a long night. And share it with someone who still believes in courage, in truth, and in the kind of love that survives a blizzard. This was. They laughed when she tried to build her own cabin until the blizzard came and she was the only one standing.